today's little warm-up. So I've been doing these little mushroom paintings lately. They are super cute. That's me. So I thought today I want to paint a face, but to warm up I will make some of a bit more mushroom painting. We are going to be heading into mushroom season shortly. And the purpose of these little daily drawings is just to warm up. So I normally paint every day, but I didn't get to paint yesterday, sadly. So even just missing that little time, it's a little bit rusty, so it's good to warm up. At any time, warming up is good because then you're not too precious about what you create. You can see, like, these were just playing and I really love the result. So I'm using a Lamy Safari fountain pen. I've just always used this. It has an extra fine nib, which I've liked because it's good for writing. However, I've been seeing some interesting shapes you can get with different shaped nibs. So I'd like to try that at some point, but I just haven't had a chance to get some. Just saying good night from Sweden. I love... Oh, hi, Eva. How are you? That's so nice. What's the weather like there at the moment? I need to come back and visit. From India. Ah, I also love India. Where in India are you from? Weather is good. Hi, so many people. This is so cool. Thank you for joining me on the warm-up. So it doesn't look like much, but these little scratchy drawings have been like such a delight, honestly, to do. And some of them I've added the gold. And they're so cute. Mumbai. I haven't been to Mumbai yet. Where did I go? I went to Hyderabad and Delhi. And where else did I go? I can't remember the other place, but it was beautiful. India had always been on my top 3 countries to go. And when I got to go, I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved the food, I loved the clothes, I loved the area. It was just beautiful. Thank you. Is it Sawyer? I really need to wear my glasses because the writing is small. So, I've been doing a lot of these faces lately, and I've always loved doing faces. A lot of you have seen this. Yeah, it'll be on, I think YouTube automatically uploads this, and this is just a little warm-up. It's morning time here, so I have coffee. So when it's not live, you'll be able to see it, Eva. So I was going to do her today. If you were there for one of my last videos, I really wanted to experiment with these 2 colours, which now I've drawn over. and it's got, I think that was Payne's Grey, and I forget what other one is here. Wait, where do you live? I live in Australia. Can you tell by my accent? It's a very Aussie accent. I live down the bottom of Australia, which is very different to the rest of the country. It is very cold. I live in Tasmania. Excuse me. So, with the faces, I have my 2 jars of water here. So I've got one for clean and one for rinsing. One for cleaning, one for rinsing, and I also have my paper towel. Hard to see, but on my other side I have my watercolour palette. I'll try and explain the colours that I'm using. So for a face, if it's a Caucasian face, the 2 colours that really work well together are Permanent Rose, and I think it's Yellow Ochre. It just gives that really nice warm peachy tone. But if you want a darker complexion, then go for Burnt Umber. Burnt Sienna. And sometimes I add a little bit of purple in there, and it just gives this really beautiful, like rich tone. Because I haven't done a face for quite a while, I'm going to go with the one that I use quite often, which is the Permanent Rose. So I'll try and mix it on here so you can see a little better. It's so nice. I don't usually do live streams in the morning because I'm still waking up. But it's so nice to see you all from wherever you're from. And I hope that you're painting and having a nice, calm day wherever you are. So I'm just mixing these 2 colours together, and you see it's really taken out that vibrant pink shade, and this is Yellow Ochre. Yes, so this is the combination Yellow Ochre, and also I think this is Raw Sienna. It is Yellow Ochre and Raw Sienna. I'm going to mix the 2 together today. Let's be crazy. And that gives this very raw kind of baseline hue for a Caucasian face. Now we can see just from the sketch that the light is hitting, you know, that part of her eye. So I'm going to try and remember that as I'm putting down the colour. Now, as you know, with watercolour, you leave the spaces on the page that you kind of want to keep white. So I'm just going to quite messily, because I have been liking the painterly, sketchy feel. Okay. So you can see that is quite a good base colour. Now, it's probably a little harder to see, but you can see that some areas have been left a little bit white just because I was quick with the brush, and because it's on dry paper, it got that brushy mark from it. What I then do is I go and pick up more of my paint. Now, my brush is quite dry, and if I wanted to pick up more parts, more whites, I can just go over with a paper towel and just make it a bit lighter. I left it too late, so it's already started to dry quite a lot. Now I'm going to put in the dark areas where I think the light is kind of struggling a little bit more to touch, just to darken up that side of the face. And with my faces, I love the sketchy feel of it. If you're having a look at this channel, you must like watercolours or art in general. And there's an Australian guy, Hugh, I think his name is, but his Instagram, you probably would have seen it, is called Kellogg's Loops, which I think is hilarious because that's the breakfast cereal. But the way he does his faces is very beautiful. He has like 1 million followers because he's been going for quite a while, and he's fabulous. And I really love like the smoothness he gets on his faces. which for a long time I tried to do, and in some ways I was quite successful as well. But by nature, I'm a very vibrant person, I guess. And so I've just always been drawn to the really sketchy, like free kind of feeling that you can get, even though I very much like and would like to try and imitate that smoothness. I do like the painterly effect as well. So we can see just with those few marks, we've darkened up much of the face. I think with most colours and most painting, the important thing is the difference between lights and darks. That's what really, the contrast. And I remember seeing, like on Instagram ages ago when I first started painting, so I felt like I didn't know what to do, especially when it came to things like landscapes and things like that. One of the artists said, make your darks darker and your lights lighter, like really pump up that contrast. And ever since I did that, I can really see the difference. Let me give you an example. I'll just pop over and grab my little mini. So this is what I'm more generally known for, is the miniature blocks. But you can see how making your lights lighter and your darks darker really add to that interest. So up the top here, it's quite light, even though it's very bright, vibrant. But it's the trees that kind of draw your focus, oddly enough, to the sky. Not the other way around. You think the first thing you would see is the trees. And in some ways you do. However, you get to appreciate the background because your eyes have automatically adjusted to what it sees in the foreground. And the same with here. Your eyes are registering that that is a low-lying part of the land, that that's a lake, and that it's kind of appreciating the clouds. It's like you're looking at the clouds, you're looking past the landscape, and that's achieved through the darks and the lights. Because it's so dark at the front, your eye is registered, okay, there's not much I can see there, what's behind it? And so you're drawn to the clouds. And you do that in real life. If you watch a sunset, you look at the sunset and you're like, oh, isn't that incredible? But you have already registered that there is land in front of you, there's trees, there's mountains. But sometimes I do it because I like to take in everything, but you would just look at the sunset and you appreciate it for what it is because it's in context with everything else in front of you. And that's what it's good about landscapes as well. Say hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming along. So I've mixed up a little bit more colour. That's dried a little bit, so I'm going to go over and make these sections darker. And just the natural creases in the eyes and where I feel the light would struggle a bit more to get to. Thank you. It's funny, landscape paintings is what I've started to come to be known for because of how I present them as well. They're miniatures and they're mounted on blocks. But I love abstracts. Abstracts is one of my favorites, and I love painting faces. And I think that's a good thing. It's good to have variety. And I think that's important for people who want to paint, want to practice painting as well, is to have that variety. So I've just put in quite a lot more colour on my palette. And so it's quite a dark hue that I've started mixing up. And so I'm starting to drop in. That's still wet, and this is where watercolour really comes into its own. Because the layer I put on just before is still wet, it's starting to flow a little bit to go where it wants to go. And that's how you can get some really soft lines, some good blends. With negative colours. What do you mean negative colours? or negative painting. If you mean negative colours like, sorry, in context because I can read this. So, Burak asks, ever tried painting with negative colours like polarized? I don't think I have. I have had a couple. Is this one? Yeah. Not polarized, but I have tried just one colour. That's actually not a bad idea. I might think about that. This one is, I'm not sure if this is what you mean. Like I tried purples. Mentioned at the start of the video, I tried this one. This was greens, but I think she looks a bit sick, so I wasn't a big fan of that. So interesting. As I turn the page, this was still sopping wet, so it's going to be hard to see. But can you see how that has kind of pushed the paint around? Okay, good. Then yes, I have. Not intentionally, but I have painted with negative colours. And it's made kind of a hard edge, but I'm not a big fan because it doesn't look like a natural hard edge. It looks like something that I've turned the page. It's hard to explain, but I'm a little bit fussy. But I do like this one here, how it's kind of pooled over to the edge. That I think is good. So I'm just going to take that out. And you can already see it feels like, especially this eye, it feels like there's some continuity, not continuity. Feels like there's roundness, there's shape to the face, and it's all lights and shadows. That's all it is. Same with the lips. The bottom lip especially feels quite full. And the reason for that is because I put a darker shade on the bottom. And the top, I just left the first layer just normal. And what that's done is that's created the feeling that light has hit that top part of that lip, but it hasn't reached the bottom yet. And so that's what gives that feeling of a round bottom lip. And you can push the boundaries with that. So I can add an extra layer of darkness right at the bottom. It hasn't fully dried, so. And that will push it even further. Just like that. Now, because I quite like how that's set, I'm going to let that section dry. I find that the sketch often looks quite different to the end result, especially after painting it. You'll see on a couple of videos that I've done earlier, especially on the faces, sometimes it looks completely different, sometimes it looks better, sometimes it doesn't. I think the important thing is to play and experiment and don't worry about the outcome. So, because this is like peachy tones, if I want my painting to look like it's working together, color wheel, people don't like the color wheel because it's hard to understand. Well, I never used to understand it. So our skin tone is kind of around here, not exactly, but it's in between like a reddish and a peachy color. If I really want this painting to stand out, I'm going to have to go with a colour that's kind of either opposite or right next to it in order to make it feel right. I don't know what other way to explain it. And because I use green a lot in my work, I'm going to go with green because I love green, especially painting with green. Cool. So Borak, sorry, I don't have my glasses. Burak said, unique drawing style, to be honest. I kind of liked it. Thank you very much. I like green too. Okay, if you like green, you just sent me on a tangent. The best green, the best combo I have found, and I will paint a little bit just so you know, and I get asked this all the time. So I think this is a sap green. So it's quite lovely and bright and, you know, happy. But then there's a Peroline green by Winsor & Newton. Oh, I mean, just look at that. Those two together, they are just fabulous. Look at that. So get yourself some sap green and some perylene green and you'll never look back. Now, the hair, it's probably difficult to see, but it's got quite a curl and very boofy, I guess. And you'll notice in some of my other drawings, this one I filled in the hair. I felt as though it needed it. Look, there's that sap green behind. I felt as though it needed it, but I am a big fan of leaving it just white, as in negative space. Okay, just like that. Okay. So there is another example of a polarized one. Okay. This is the perylene green behind, and you can just see just how beautiful it goes with this very burnt orange colour. They just, yeah, work so well together. Okay. Look at the gold as well. That gold is fabulous. It is handmade gold watercolours, and it's just beautiful. I have that on my website, but there's not many left, so I have to get some more. And look at that. It's just lovely, lovely, lovely. So you can see the combinations, and this is something that's interesting. When you paint a lot, you'll be able to go back through your paintings and find the color combinations that you naturally do that you don't realize that you're doing. And this is something that I found. I keep a lot of I do throw a lot away. I get great pleasure in throwing things into the fire, especially drawings. What that has done for me is made me not precious about things and just to explore. But the ones that I did keep, because I thought, oh, that's kind of cute, or that's nice, or I just liked it, when I come back like 5-6 years later, after painting for a long time, I finally understood why I've liked certain things. And this was one thing that I discovered. I did it was a dodgy landscape. Dodgy, that's Australian, isn't it? It was a landscape that didn't look very good. But what made me keep it, which I realise now why I liked it, was the colour combination. It had these fiery reds and oranges and this very dark, deep green. And it's only after a couple of years of painting and just playing that when I looked back, I was like, hey, that's why that works. It's because those colours just work so well together. They just pop. And so that's why, like, I encourage everyone just to paint and paint and paint and paint and just try their best at not being too precious about what they're doing, because you will learn later on either why you like it or why you didn't like it. Another thing that I picked up very early on, especially because when I got this set of watercolours, I had never touched watercolour before in my life. And I just got the 24 set, and it was the Winsor & Newton Professional colours, because I thought, I'm going to try it. I got the best, which I think at the time, so this was about 15 years ago now, I think it was 2010, maybe 14 years, I thought, I'm treating myself. I love to create. I'm going to get the professional, and at least I can give it a go knowing that I've got good quality paint, not realising at the time that the paper was more important, but that comes later. And I discovered that indigo was just my favourite pigment in the whole wide world, and this, by far, this pigment I have gotten through much more than any other pigment by far. And the reason for that, and we're going back to the darks and the lights again, you can get the darkest darks and the lightest lights with this incredible pigment. I've tried a number of different brands, but I always go back to Winsor & Newton. I like their combination of that pigment. And this is what happens when you're not careful and you're in your sketchbook. So, see what happened? It was wet. I must have touched the page and it's gone on my painting. So annoying. But that's what this is for, not to be precious about it. And that kind of informs a lot of what you do as well. So now I'm mixing up some darker paint as well, and I'm going to again go over and darken some more darks on this side of her face. And the reason I'm staying on this side of her face is because the light is coming from here, and we want to emphasize those parts of, as though there are certain parts. That's actually a little bit wrong, because that part of her face, the brow bone, would stand out to the light a little bit better than it did, so I shouldn't put shadow there. Okay, I'm going to darken the bottom of her lip, just like we mentioned before. Okay. Now I've darkened the bottom part of her top lip as well, and you can see how much that is kind of separated those two parts of her mouth. Underneath the eyebrow, I'm just going to colour just ever so slightly, because I'm pushing it a little bit here. Your eyebrows, unless they're massive, don't generally cast a shadow. Hairline here, I'm just going to try and imagine where the light would hit the hair and cast a shadow on the face. Okay, happy with that so far. I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to go back. So it's interesting. I'm actually quite relaxed this morning when it comes to, like, it's very nice just to sit and paint. And what did I do with that painting, that drawing that I just did? So if you remember, or if you're still watching, right at the beginning I started with like just a quick mushroom sketch. Completely different. Like, they are not related in the slightest, like a face and trees with a couple of mushrooms growing out. But I think that's important too, like you can see some of the other ones I've done in the past, to mix it up. Sometimes you can get like really into the zone, and like my goal today is to paint some landscapes. Okay, I've already taped up my blocks that I normally use. I've changed the wood. I think I mentioned that last time. So it's beautiful Tasmanian oak. So this is local to our area. But I'm not feeling in the flow of landscapes yet. So I think it's interesting. Like, you really need to just go with the flow. And I'm loving how the face looks right now. I hope that what I choose to do later will reflect that and keep it going. But you can see in my sketch, I've kind of got this big fluffy shawl. I want to try and maintain that big bulkiness, because I feel like the eyes, we're really drawn to the eyes. Talking about the eyes, I might work on them a little bit. Now, in my sketch, I see people use like kneadable erasers and kind of erase the sketch. That's a really good idea, but I never think to do it. I completely forgot today. So, and sometimes I like seeing the pencil sketch underneath. I think it adds, especially with this style. If it's a more, what's the word? Clean style. Let me show you. This is something I've done quite a while ago. It's only a print because I've already sold this one. You can see that it's in comparison, this is very sketchy, but this one is quite clean and deliberate in its highlighting its features. What was I saying about that? Oh yeah, so this one, I'd prefer not to see the sketch underneath, because I want the painting style to be the highlight. And so I love that, you know, there's darkness around the eyes and it's kind of got that Art Deco kind of feel to it. But with something like this, I would like to change. I want to see that pencil sketch underneath. And so that's why, number one, I forget to rub it out with a kneadable eraser. But number two, that kind of adds to the charm, I guess. So we talked about going with green earlier. So I'm going to stick with that and give her some green eyes. And I find that with the eyes, especially the iris, because it's not a super realistic painting. So I've just got a very small brush. I think it's a number 1. It's got a nice point on it. It's a Rosemary & Co brush, which most of mine are. Fabulous brushes. You don't have to go overboard with the colour to get the sense or the mood. So it can be quite subtle. Now, because this side of the face is dark, that feels quite a lot darker. Now, you can see it. I can see it through the camera. She looks a little bit cross-eyed. It looks like this eye is like a little bit wonky. And that's probably because I didn't position it right. And I think that's the difference too between, I'm not going to, well, I am going to say it, real artists and, how can it be not real? Because I am an artist. Those who are very skilled at their craft. So for me, I didn't pick up that she's going to look a bit cross-eyed in the sketch. But in all honesty, I don't care, because I feel like that's very, what's the word that I'm trying to use? Very indicative of me. Is that I am very haphazard and very slap happy when it comes to painting. I don't get worked up about it. And so I think it's okay to have these little mistakes, because I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try and fix that next time. And other times I feel like I get them dead on, absolutely fine. But a friend of mine mentioned it. She's like, you know it's yours. Because sometimes one eye is bigger and one eye is smaller. And I like that. I like that it's not perfect. We are not perfect. So why try and make this perfect? This is another example of, I didn't pick it up in the sketch, but one eye is bigger than the other. And I was like, I actually don't mind that. I think that's okay. So I know I'll probably get some comments like, no, that looks terrible. Understand how it must be frustrating, especially if you like everything a certain way, but I don't actually care. I actually quite like it. I like the quirkiness of it. Okay, coming back in all of that, I'm going to pick up, so we looked at that Perylene green, which I said it was that beautiful dark green, and there's a Perylene violet, which is a violet shade, but it has this same darkness quality to it. I mean, look at that, that's just lovely. So I'm going to pick up some of that, because you can see in the pan it is quite dark. And I'm going to add that as the final layer of shadows on my face. So I've picked up quite a lot. It's a dry-ish brush. And I'm just going to drop that into the sides. Some of that is quite, look how dark that is. Don't be afraid to go dark. I'm going to pick up more water and more of that Perylene, because already it's like diluted too much for my taste. And that is okay. I'm going to pick that. I'm going to do some of the eyebrow in that Perylene violet. It's not perfect, and I like how it bleeds a little bit at the end there. Let's do a little bit of a dark shadow. Now, shadows are interesting. They're the ones that you're most afraid to put on, especially the really dark ones, but they're the ones that really make things pop. So you can see in the mouth here, we've already talked about how it makes it kind of curved. In the middle where the mouth meets, I'm going to just put a little bit in there at the corners of the mouth. The corners of the mouth is what makes her smile or what makes her grumpy. I want a little bit of a smile, so I'm going to slightly flick it up, that corner, and same with this. Okay. And then underneath, just relatively thick in the nostrils. This is still very dark, very dense paint. Back again with this side. I'll go get some more paint just here. That's really emphasized it, the thickness of the lids. So I am in no way an expert. There are plenty that, have either been to school and, know anatomy or whatever. But I also feel that sometimes play is an experience is also an incredible teacher. So I'm just trying to give the suggestion of ears in here. So we painted the green. Let's put a little few dark, so there's shadows under here. And her, what's it called? Is it the iris? The really dark bit. Pupil. Come on, I should know that. I'm going to darken that up with this same violet, Perylene violet colour, again by Winsor & Newton. Honestly, I really should reach out to them. There's the amount of recommendations I make for their colours. Now, I messed that up. Oh well. I don't mind. Try and even it up on the other side. Now she just looks unimpressed. Let's do the hair. Let's do the hair. Liking her face. Now, I said I was going to go with the green because it'll really bring out her eyes, won't it? I think I'm going to have to stick with my plan. Okay. Let's do the background first. So I am going to pick up some sap green and just dump it in there very, what's the word? Roughly, because I like that painterly feel. And I will do the same for the other side. If you're watching, I'd love to know where you're watching from. And if it's somewhere I haven't been before, I'd love to know where to go to explore. Okay, I like that. Again, play with your darks, play with your lights. I'm going to pick up some of my Perylene green. And while that page is still a bit wet, that background, I'm going to make it pop with darkness. So you notice that I'm putting the darkness. Remember that the light is coming this way. So this side will naturally, hopefully, be darker because it's on shadow if she's standing against a wall. But still keeping, now because I love playing with shapes in the hair, they kind of look like little combs. Cute. I'm going to just increase the darkness of that. Now this is a dagger brush. It'll be your best friend, honestly. Let's do that. Okay, and just to even it out, I might put a little bit of darkness over here, but not too much, not as much as the other side. Very good. So we can see just by doing that, it has given us depth. It's brought the face forward just a little bit. Ta-da. Now I'm procrastinating on purpose because I don't quite know what to do. I think I definitely will leave her hair white in this one. I feel like she needs I'm picking up some, is it cadmium red? Now can you see how the paint's going a little bit streaky at the bottom? That means that there is something wrong with this paper. Okay, see how it's kind of like pooling and it's not. Once you start working in 100% cotton, you'll understand what I mean. It's not going on smoothly. It's not the fact that it's my brush that I'm trying to do brushy work. It's the sizing. So it's what they treat the watercolor paper with in order to absorb the watercolor better. After a while, if watercolor paper isn't stored properly, the sizing on it will deteriorate. And that will, see, I've put water down and it's making these, see, that's kind of covered it, but then I've lost some of the freeness of expression. So watercolor paper does have an expiry date. It can last a long time, but just use it. Just use it. Don't keep it in a cupboard, because then it'll do strange things with your paint. It'll react strangely and you'll be like, I don't understand. This is supposed to be good. That's because it does have an expiry date. If it's stored properly, I have had like a 10-meter roll of watercolor paper for a few years now, because I paint so small, and it has been fine. It has been absolutely fine. I am going to go in with indigo, but before I do that, there is a bit of cobalt turquoise, which is quite an expensive pigment. I'm going to put that in the middle with water and then put the indigo around it. I'm kind of just making up the colours as I go. I'll try and be a bit careful around her face. Yeah, you can see how that's pooling. It's working for this style of sketch, but if I wanted something a little bit more clean, like that other example I showed you, that would frustrate me, because the paper on this book has expired. This is something I did notice with this book. I buy my books from a lovely seller on Etsy. I have to get her name. See, that's the problem with Etsy. You never know who you're buying off. You just say, I got it on Etsy. And I only get my sketchbooks from her now, because she makes 100% cotton watercolor sketchbooks. This one, unfortunately, I think the paper may have been bad for a while. Not her fault, because sometimes it can be quite finicky. But the reason I buy my sketchbooks is I love vintage books, and she binds them in vintage books. So if I'm not reading them, I can have them. I really like that. I like the contrast of colour in here, and I like what's been happening around here. Is it finished? For those of you that are still watching, give me a thumbs up or something if you think you would stop here. For me, I have one more thing that I would do. If you were painting this, would you add anything else? Now, once this layer is dry, there's just so much going on, and I feel like the first thing you look at is her face, and then everything else kind of comes in around it. I like it. I actually really like how she's turned out. I won't do anything more to her face, I don't think. I think at the moment I like the contrast of it. But what I'll do, hopefully this paper will hold up to it. But let me just give you an example, a smaller example. Find my pencil. Of a different way to render a face with watercolor. So I'll just quickly draw one out, and this will show you kind of my process of drawing, how I figure it out. I rarely use a reference, and the reason for that is because I'm lazy, and I don't know, just my girls have evolved so much since I first started drawing them. And these days, like, the reference needs to be, I don't know, copyright free or something like that. Same with like landscape images. So a lot of the times I just paint either what's right in front of me if I'm out hiking or something. Now again, this is quite sketchy by nature how I've done it. I can tell the eyes just because of that, what we talked about. The eyes are a bit off on this one. But I will get the kneadable eraser and go over this and lighten it up, because this is the other way that we can render a face. So let me just draw this in. And this shows you kind of the smoothness that you can achieve too. Let me do that again. The eyes are a bit off, and this is a very quick sketch. So, as you can see, right. So the purpose of this is I want to show you what other, using exactly the same colors, how you can get a very different feel from a skin, just the way you place the skin. That chin is not right. It feels a little bit too stumpy for my liking, just for this face. So let's make it a bit longer. That's a bit longer, but now it feels her mouth is too high. Okay, so those who actually know drawing are probably screaming at me right now. Okay, happy with that. So let's look at using exactly the same colors, but instead of this kind of face, which has a very sketchy feel about it, I am going to, let's get these colors over here, so be a lot more measured, I guess, with how I use my paints. And this takes longer in that there's a lot more drying time. So I'm going to mix up, and it's going to be a very light layer first. Okay, so lots of water. Let's draw this layer over here. So some of you may get quite bored because we actually have to wait for this one to dry. This is the only way we can make this one work. I might do some drawing of more mushroom trees in between. Or I might paint a landscape. I might paint a landscape. Sufficiently warmed up. And that's the good thing about watercolour as well. You can have more than one thing on the go. Okay, looking a bit scary now, but we'll just leave that to dry. And I will get out a landscape. While we're waiting for that to dry, I'll just pop that to the side and we can come back to that. What colour should I do today? Let's try for a lovely lavender sky. I will go in and put in some clouds. Wow, we've been painting for an hour so far. That has gone quickly. Quickly, quickly, quickly. Time flies when you're having fun. Pick up some permanent rose. and then put some colour in the sky. Now because it's still wet, it's bleeding out quite nicely and making, kind of finding its own natural path. And there's not many hard edges. So that's the difference between dry paper and wet paper. Now, as a reflection of that, I will just put in a ridge line here. I decided I didn't like that extra little bit, so I'm going to increase the ridge line. Now that's the first layer of the landscapes. I don't like how dark that is. I'm going to go back with a clean brush and just lift that up and just try and lighten that up a little bit. I'm just running my brush over it and then just wiping off the excess paint that come off the brush. It's only a very damp brush. It's definitely not wet by any means. And I will let that dry. So I can put that aside, put that up there. And we come back to our little face that we started earlier. It's dry enough. So this, because this is small, so I'm going to pick up the same colour that I mixed before. And this is where we can start to build the contours of the face. But instead of it being sketchy like this one, we're going to try and control it a little more. So again, I'm going to imagine that the light is hitting from this way, okay, that way. And so I'm going to darken these parts of the face. And you can see how it's kind of following where my brush went. So I'm just going to quickly put down this layer. We're working quickly here. Rinse off my brush with water. And then I'm going back in with a very damp, slightly damp brush, and I'm blending that edge away. Okay. I've just rinsed off my brush again, wiped it on my paper towel. That somehow, I got blue in that. Okay. So you can see I've got a subtle curve of the face now because I've blended out that side with water. So I'll do the same for this side. I'll just paint in another layer, just like that. Rinse off my brush, wipe it on my paper towel. It's still damp and I'm just blending out those edges so that you can't see where they started. Rinsing off my brush, damp. So it started to be a bit too scratchy. I wasn't able to get the blend happening. It's because the brush was too dry. And you can see just from 2 layers, we've kind of got a little bit of a curve to the face now. I'll go into the nose and I will darken just the bottom of the nose here. In our old sketch, we kind of left it scratchy like that, but this I just rinsed off my brush and now I'm just picking up the corners or the edges of that and I'm blending it up to try and make it feel blended, well blended. So there we go. And this is the second layer. Put that aside, we'll let that dry. We go back to whatever else we're working on. And that's the process, especially if you're building up in layers. You can speed it up by getting a hairdryer and drying it off. But when it's so quiet and lovely like this, I don't want it to be disturbed by an annoying sound of a hairdryer. So I'm picking up some more of my purple and I'm going in with a different layer over the top. And I'm going to put in an imaginary horizon line for that layer, just there. Now because we have that lighter layer underneath, and I'm just going over with just long strokes, it gives the appearance of ripples on the water. Because that layer is still wet, I'm just going to drop in a darker blue, and that should fade out nicely. And then I'm going to reflect some of those darker patches in the water down below. And the same principle applies here as we talked about earlier with the face. Landscapes, again, darks darker, lights lighter. That other layer on our face is good to go. It's dry enough. So I'm going to go in, pick up some more pigment, and I might mix a little bit more of our permanent rose in there just to give it a little bit more oomph. You can see I'm using a small brush. This is only a small face, and I'm only doing certain sections of it, so I don't want it to be too big. And let's do the same thing we did before. Let's go over a layer, which before we left very rough, but we want to smooth this out. So I'm rinsing off my brush, wiping off the excess water, and then trying to smooth out those layers. Blend it in a little bit more. That wasn't a very good job at smoothing it. Let's go over with some more water. So this is where I'm starting to notice that the sizing on the paper might have had a little bit of give in it. Same thing, let's go with the layer here. And let's go over the top, smoothing it out, making sure we get rid of that harsh line. And we're basically, excuse me, just trying to blend the layers into each other. And you'll notice we've barely touched like the middle of the face, and we can really start to see a curve, especially when we've added those layers. It looks a bit funny without the eyes at the moment. I might work a little bit on the lips. And the same principle can be applied here. I'm going to put quite a dark layer around, and then we can blend it out. Okay, I've just noticed something that I missed before, and with cotton paper, so that line on her above her eye I had missed. So I've got some water, clean water on a clean brush, and I've just evened that out. Doing the same thing on her nose. I'm putting a little bit extra darkness on her nose, just on the underneath there. Rinse my brush, and then go back in and just try and feather out that line so that it's a little more blended. You can see starting to get kind of soft shapes, which is different to the one that we had before, which is different to that one, which is very sketchy. I'm going to go in again with darkness on the sides of her face. Rinse off my brush, wipe off the excess, and then use that damp brush to feather it out for that layer underneath. So this is just a different way of rendering the skin. Rinsing off my brush, clean water. And I'll do the same for the other side of the face. clean water, and then blending it out. And I'll do the same for under her nose. Again, or the bottom part of her nose. It's a very distinct line, but clean water, clean brush, and then just feathering out that and giving some definition. Dip my brush back into water, wiped off the excess, just so we always have something to blend. Okay, so we can see there's definite difference between how the face is rendered here, because it's very brushy and I didn't blend out any of the layers that I've put on. But by blending out the layers, you get a very different effect, which is great. So just so she doesn't look completely weird, let's give her some eyes, just so. Just try and leave some white for a reflection. Just leave a little bit less white here. Good. Okay. And then we can go in with some darkness. So I'll go in with the Perylene Violet again, just because it goes with the skin a little bit more. And I will give her some eyebrows. And it's not as dark as the one, because we're trying to go for a different kind of feel, different look with her. So let's darken up those little sections there. Yeah, this is hopefully give you an idea of different ways you can render the face. And this went much longer than I expected it to, and I have things to do. So I'm going to just finish off her little face. I didn't finish the watercolour yet, the landscape. I'll do that in a little bit. But I have other things that I need to get done for the moment. Okay. Let's try and blend this a little better so it's not so crazy. Now her eyes just look a little bit strange, so I'm going to go in and darken it with a couple of okay, that's made her less weird. Still a little cross-eyed, but that's just an example of how you can render the face. So I'm going to leave it there for you today. It was longer than I thought, which is good. I had fun. But just play, and she turned out really cool, so I really like her. So if you had a play too, thank you for joining me, if you joined me, and we'll see you next time. And our other little one, which is what we did over here. Okay, we did a lot today.